Hello, comic fans. Here's Al Grey, and here's Batman Zero Year, the Absolute Edition with slipcase. And this gimmick foil thing there, I really, I should show you this before I get into the book proper, because this is really neat. Here we have the young Bruce, hey, Zero Year, but he has already some bruises, haha. And there you have one of the big baddies, so will be no spoiler when I talk about it. So, and now, yeah, the story is Zero Year, as you don't know it. It's about Bruce becoming bats. So, simple as that. Now I have to take care of this foil not to be scratched. That's downside of this kind of gimmick stuff. But I really love it when they go this kind of extra mile for this nevertheless pretty expensive book here. So, the build of the book is very good, I have to say. We have these end papers here. Unusual but pretty beautiful solution. The color scheme in the table of contents represents the overall very colorful comic. Look at that. The binding of the book is pretty decent, so you get this hole there, and the book opens very flat. But now to Batman and the actual story. The New 52 were very important to me. I loved the more obscure stuff like Frankenstein, but was very impressed by the big cheese called Batman by Snyder and Capullo. I've never read Zero Year until this week. For me, it was the missing part of a trilogy with the Court of the Owls in the center and Death of the Family as one bloody side piece. But I wanted it in the absolute format, so I had to wait almost forever, and it was a no-brainer to buy it now. Despite some rather so-so reviews that I read about Zero Year, and despite the fact that this could be very likely the weakest Bat effort by Snyder and Capullo so far. And well, the packaging helped to lure me in. Unfortunately, after reading the tome, I have to acknowledge that Zero Year really is the weakest effort by the dynamic duo of Capullo and Snyder. Well, I can't speak about Batman Metal or other stories that they made since, because I've lost track of the more recent Bat stories. They are probably better than Zero Year as well, I suppose. That's being said, Greg Capullo's art is actually fantastic as always, especially the brilliant colors by FCO Placencia sparkled their way into my brain. That was a joy for sure, unusually bright and intense, especially for a Bat story. As to the story, well, it's a decent enough foil for visual bombast, maybe even to make a movie out of it or two. Heck, actually, it is a movie, but I wanted to read a comic. And there is already this origin story for Bats called Year one of the best comics ever written and drawn. Snyder knew that, of course, and he must have known that DC led him into a trap, but he walked into the trap nevertheless. They could not make it better than Year One, so Snyder tried to make it different, and different it became. Bigger, louder, more explosives, more action, more from everything. The problem is that we have a lot of comics like this, and I'm a bit tired of all the explosions and this kind of whole worlds and cities and countries and distress extravaganza. The story at the core is still how Bruce Wayne and Jim Gordon came together, including a very tough and cumbersome description how Gordon got his coat. And you can add Alfred, of course, and you can add Lucius Fox. So you get enough familiar beats to make you feel at home in a Gotham under great peril. And you get pretty cool and gruesome bone monsters due to Dr. Death, aka Karl Helfern. That was very neat as well. And I liked the Red Hood gang, especially Red Hood #1 and the end of that story part, even though it was somehow foreseeable. But overall, Zero Year fails to tell the story of man becoming Batman like Year One had done so beautifully. Batman has to suffer a lot, of course, in Zero Year as well, but not so much because of the lack of experience, but because of the incredible tasks he had to survive. The portrait of Batman is, in my opinion, not very coherent in that regard. That's being said, he and Alfred have some beautiful moments, especially a scene in the end when Alfred has to acknowledge once again that Bruce is a man driven by his purpose, who has no time for other things like founding a family and the like. That was very on point. But for an instance, to choose the Riddler as the big baddie for the second half of the story, well, that's nothing to celebrate in my opinion. He's just an annoying nerd and no Bane. And that this guy, Riddler, should be able to have a whole city in a stranglehold is just not plausible at best. Snyder knew that, we can be sure of. But, well, as I said it, he walked into a trap with open eyes. On the bottom line, Zero Year is an action-packed but in parts silly story that will keep you entertained and your eyes pleased with pretty and colorful art. Don't expect more and don't compare it ever to Year One, what I just did. My bad. Before we go, just a look at the bonus pages, which are, of course, pretty generous as usual. We get a variant cover gallery, and boy, there are some beautiful covers by Capullo and others like Jock. And here we have the Red Hood #1 just with this big helmet, very stylish gangster. Some more rather experimental stuff, some more, Capullo doing his Capullo things, stuff there. And boy, this looks really cool, but maybe my favorite is this wacky one here. And then after all this beautiful, splendid glory, we get some kind of director's cut. Which means we get the drawings, the roughs for issue 1. For Secret City Part 1 by Greg Capullo. And you can compare this one here to the finished art. Capullo is just a beast, as they say. Rightfully so. But we don't get not only the art for this, but the art here by Rafael Albuquerque, who did some pretty decent bonus stories. Especially the first one here is really nice. And even nicer that they included the black and white version. Then some thoughts by Scott Snyder. We get a bit more black and white art in the end. And so, that's Batman Zero Year. Thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.